Hey there, Force of Will fans. Before we start, I'd like to remind you to like the videos, subscribe to the channel, share, comment, send me a message. I'm going to start giving stuff away at 10 subscribers, which isn't that far away. And I don't know what I'm going to give away yet, but it'll be worth to subscribe. And I want to take a quick moment to thank CoolStuffInc.com. I order a fair amount of singles for many TCGs, and I order, I would say, a bulk of them through CoolStuffInc.com, and I've never had an issue until recently when I ran into a customer service issue and they handled it absolutely perfectly. So thanks to Cool Stuff Inc. I'll drop a link in the description. If you're thinking about buying singles, I would direct you there. They have fair prices and great customer service. Thanks so much, Cool Stuff Inc. So on to the update that was recently released by Force of Will Co., Invitation to New Valhalla Part 2. I had been waiting for this, hoping that it would relieve some of the tension that I was feeling from the last update. And this update was all about runes. Here's the key points to the update if you haven't read it. Players start with 5 runes face down in a rune deck in the rune zone, which is a new zone. Rulers have Divinity of 10, which is the currency that's going to be used to play runes. Some runes will also be chants, which can be placed in the main deck. And using Divinity is not limited to once per turn. So I think I come across as a fairly negative person sometimes, and that's not going to change in this video. But I want to hit that reminder that I actually like Force of Will, and I want to see it grow and succeed. That's the purpose of my opinion, me voicing my opinion. Let's start with point 1 of the update. Players will start with 5 runes face down in a rune deck in the rune zone. On the surface, I don't actually have a problem with this regarding any of the game's mechanics. It's simple enough to set out a deck of 5 runes. However, I do think that the more decks they add, the more zones they add, the more difficult and unapproachable the game becomes for new players. Let's look at some of the top TCGs. Yu-Gi-Oh! 1 deck. Pokemon, 1 deck and some prize cards, which, by the way, is why I don't play Pokemon. I have some friends who were very prominent Pokemon players that tried to get me back into the game, and I thought, sure, I'll give it a try. Without fail, I would stick cards essential to the deck's strategy into the prize zone. And I kept losing, and I knew from that moment forward, Pokemon was dead to me. Oh yeah, and Magic. 1 deck. Now these are the types of games that Force of Will is competing with. I can, and have, convinced players from other games to try Force of Will, and they tend to enjoy it. And why wouldn't they? It's a great game. It's the best that's out there, in my opinion. But I always have something to relate it back to. Magic stones are like lands or energies. Battles resolve like combat in Magic, except that you don't declare all your attackers at once. It's more similar to Yu-Gi-Oh! In that way. It was already a stretch to convince people that start the game that it was simple, when at the start of that learning process I had to explain, so this is your main deck, this is your stone deck, and this is your ruler, and they're all placed in separate places. Now I'm going to have to try to convince new players that happen to see a game and get interested that having 4 different starting zones is not complicated. I think that if I wasn't already familiar with Force of Will, and I saw people playing it with the new Rune Zone, I would think that it was just too complicated to get involved in. And you might be saying, oh, come on, it's not that bad. Just remember that if Force of Will is unable to attract new players, it will die. Period. I know it seems like an impossible thing now, but Magic faced that very problem. The game was becoming so complicated that new players just weren't picking it up. Wizards specifically changed aspects of the game and their marketing to attract new players, and it worked. I think that's one of the reasons that Magic is thriving the way it is now. I'm just hoping that Force of Will Co. isn't repeating Wizards' mistakes and is willing to learn from them. On to the second topic from the update. Rulers are going to have Divinity of 10, which is the currency that will be used to play runes. Again, I don't see anything intrinsically wrong with this. I think this is Force of Will trying to transition rulers into something more akin to planeswalkers. When Wizards created planeswalkers, many of their effects were just popular spells. Now, I think that that's what runes are probably going to start out as well. Another way to just cast popular spells. The third thing mentioned in the update was that runes, some of them, will also be chants that are going to be placed, that can be placed in the main deck. And I think this pretty much confirms one of my fears from the previous update, that runes are going to be another card rather than being printed like a token or an insert or an emblem from Magic. And that's another card that I will need to purchase or trade for or get lucky enough to open in a pack. So that now, once the new set drops, rather than purchasing 51 cards to play a deck, I have to purchase 56, and so do new players. And assuming that good runes, popular runes, average about $10, that means that's another $50 for every deck that I want to construct. And another question that comes to my mind, are chants that are also runes going to be limited to 4 copies across both decks, or are we going to see 4 copies in the main and 1 in the rune deck? I'm always concerned about cost. I see cost as a huge prohibitory factor for new players, and it's one of my major selling points for Force of Will that the investment is less than Magic. Oh, you want to pick up a new card game? Sure, Magic is popular, but you can buy an entire top-tier Force of Will deck for what some Magic players spend on their mana base. My dollar just goes farther in Force of Will. I believe that, and I want to see that continue. But now I may have to come up against the very reasonable argument, why would I play Force of Will when I need to purchase 5 copies of a card to be competitive, versus Magic where I only need to purchase 4? And the final point from the update, the takeaway, and I saved the worst for last, in my opinion, is that Divinity is not limited to once per turn. I really don't know what the design team was thinking. Perhaps it went something like this. Gee, we made a card that was so good that it dominates, and I mean dominates, every top 8. To the point that we had to ban it in Wanderer and remove key cards from the deck in New Frontiers. Rather than not making that mistake again, let's just give every ruler that card's effect and not limit that effect to once per turn. We're geniuses. Seriously, Force of Wilco design team. Seriously. This isn't power creep. This is power leaps and bounds. Let's just imagine for a second that they print very simple cards as runes. Cards that probably would be commons or uncommons in a set and not thought of as being powered as an individual card. Cards with text like counter target spell, draw a card, put 2 5/5s on the field. Any of those would not be concerning in a main deck with an appropriate will cost. But let's just take that last one. Put 2 5/5s on the field. Let's assume they don't want you to do it too much, so they make it a 5 cost. You have to use 5 divinity to do it. So imagine an aggro deck starting with 4 5/5s on turn 1. And I'm not even certain if these runes are going to be cast so that you can counter them like a spell or a chant, or if it's going to be an ability where you have to counter the ability. I don't know. I just see this all ending so badly. I sincerely hope that I'm wrong about all of this, and everything that I'm talking about doesn't happen, and everyone loves the new card, and world hunger ends, and we all get puppies and kittens. But I don't see that happening. I'm proceeding under the advice, sort of just hope for the best. Maybe they'll realize their mistake and limit the use of divinity to once a turn, or make the divinity cost for even simple things that seem innocuous, very expensive. And maybe the runes will be printed as commons, so they'll actually be accessible and I won't have to spend $50 on every deck. On the bright side, we are going to get to see the rulers next week. I'm super excited about that. And maybe getting more information on them is going to make this all a little easier. That's about all I had for the update. Once again, thank you for watching. Like, subscribe, send me a message. I especially want to thank all of the people that are watching overseas. It's been absolutely amazing to see people in Europe logging in to see this, people in Japan, Central America. I mean, just all over the world, people have been watching some of my videos, and I want to thank you all so much. And you'll all hear from me again soon. So again, thanks for watching.